and was recently appointed to his current post of Chief Technical Officer in October of 2011. Dr. Wubbolts has over 65 publications and patents in the areas of biocatalysis and metabolic engineering, serves on the editorial board of Biocatalysis and Biotransformations, and he's provided numerous invited lectures around the world. We are very pleased to have him join us today, and I hope you will help me welcome Dr. Marcel Wubbolts.
Thank you. So good afternoon. The microphone is working. Enjoy your meal. I already had a quick bite at my meal, and I will finish it up afterwards. It's an enormous pleasure to be here, and Bob, thank you and the organizing committee for the invitation. And it's really a great opportunity to tell you something about what we have in mind when we talk about green chemistry or green technologies or sustainability at DSM. Let me see if I can get my presentation up. So what I'd like to tell you something about is there's a lot of talk about sustainability. I would like to highlight some of the things we've done in the area of sustainability. Also get rid of some of the, let's say, misconceptions around sustainability that you do see appearing in the markets. And also, what is it worth? So what is really the value that we can generate with a sustainability agenda? If you look at DSM, many people in the US are not very familiar with DSM. I mean, there are several large companies, of course, that you know quite well. Within Europe, we're far more known. We used to be called the chemical giant from Limburg, the Netherlands. We are no longer in Limburg. Limburg is a province within the Netherlands. It's a fairly tiny region. It used to be a coal mining entity that we were, and we basically made a lot of shifts over our 100-year history. So we started in coal mining, and we're currently into life sciences and material sciences. So we have activities that go as far as making materials, so nylons, fairly simple applications you could think, all the way up to doing cell culture type of custom manufacturing for pharmaceutical industries. So it's quite a breadth that we have. So we have a life sciences and material sciences technology profile, you could say. We're also called, we call ourselves a science-based company. If you look at our tagline here, DSM, Bright Science, Brighter Living. So what we want to do is use our scientific solutions to create solutions that actually create brighter lives for people. If you look at where we're active, we have over 100 years of activities in life sciences. We are the world leading producer of antibiotics, pharmaceutical intermediates, vitamins, and nutritional ingredients. And we're involved in fighting malnutrition and hidden hunger. And it was also addressed this morning by Dr. Sakashiri that is an enormous challenge. How do we actually feed the 9 billion people that need to be fed in 2050? We're active in micronutrients. We do see that around 2 billion people are affected by malnutrition. Like 1 billion is affected by having too little and too low quality food. And 1 billion is actually suffering from overnutrition, you could say. In material sciences, we have over 40 years of materials experience. We're a world leader in performance materials for application in electronics, sports and leisure, protection, automotive, construction, and energy. You may not realize it, but there's quite a bit of plastics in the cars that you drive, and also in the iPods and the iPhones that you use. That is actually made by DSM. So our global presence, we started in Europe, but we are globally spread right now, and we have over 4,000 people actually working in the US. We have around 2,500 people working in R&D. Some recent press messages, and I've selected a few that are more focused, let's say, on the US situation. In the 23rd of January, we announced a joint venture with POET to push our solutions for advanced biofuels. We have developed enzymes in yeast for advanced biofuels, and we are in a joint venture. I'll say a little bit more about that later. We have acquired the food enzymes business and key technology from Veranium. We've announced a bid for acquisition of Kenzie Nash in the biomedical area. And we have acquired Ocean Nutrition Canada to expand our nutritional lipids. So as you see, if you look at these announcements, many of those are actually in the Americas. So we are quite strongly represented here. We have, on the 12th of June, received for the sixth time the sustainability leadership position in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And today, our CEO is actually contributing to the Rio +20 conference on climate in Rio de Janeiro to address the issues that we see in nutrition and also the issues that we, of course, see with the environment. Key figures, I'll be very brief. We have a net sales of around 9 billion euros and an operating profit of around 900 million euros. Workforce, as I said, 22,000 people globally. So our mission, our purpose is to create brighter lives for people today and for generations to come. So people today is clear. Generations to come is really addressing the sustainability challenges that we see. And we connect our unique competences in life sciences, material sciences to create solutions that nourish, protect, and improve performance. So challenge number one, and it was mentioned this morning as well by Dr. Shakashiri. There are, and there will be in 2050, 9 billion people to feed. Although we don't know for sure that this number will be 9 billion, but if you extrapolate the current growth curve, that is the case. And that's an enormous challenge. And we have to address that. And in essence, you can say there is enough food, we just have to find a way to distribute it better. The second thing is, if you look at that challenge, you also see that these 9 billion people, they will have an increased income. And their diets are changing as well. They will be feeding animal protein rather than vegetable protein, which means that the efficiency of protein production is actually going down, in essence. Protein production via animals is far less efficient than protein production via plants. On top of that, we also throw away something like 30 to 40% of our foods. And that is post-harvest in developing countries, but it's also at retail and household level. So I'd like to stimulate you, all of you, to eat your lunch completely. The other challenge, second challenge, is energy security. If you look at the history and you go back 1,000 years and you go ahead 1,000 years, it's clear that agriculture will supply us with the resources we need. In between, we have had oil, petrochemical resources. And in essence, we don't know how fast this will go. And of course, shale gas is not really helping this for now. But there was only a brief history in time, you could say, where petrochemical feedstocks were available. So we have to think about how do we do this longer term. Can we use agricultural feedstocks for our future? Taking into account that the primary purpose of agriculture is producing food for those 9 billion people. And so we have to find a compromise between the two. Third challenge is climate change. Here, shale gas will not help either. If we focus on petrochemical feedstocks, shale gas is an interesting economic solution, but it's not really an ecological solution. Happy to have a discussion afterwards. So if you look at nutrition for all, we're focusing very strongly on that. And some of these things we actually are doing together with the World Food Programme of the United Nations. Because we realize that if we can help other nations to develop and have better nutrition for their children, they will become customers for us as well. We are a commercial entity, so we're a for-profit organization. But doing this right now and realizing that this will not bring us any short-term profit is a thing that we typically have to explain to our financial stakeholders. It's not an easy discussion. But our CEO is very, very good at that. The other thing in materials, we're focusing very strongly on renewable energy. For instance, sustainable windmill blades, enabling wind-powered shipping. Here you see a sail that is used for wind powering of ocean steamers, which can save up to 30% of their energy use. And we can use that because what we do is we supply the ropes that are actually keeping this kite in its place, and that's made out of Dyneema, world's strongest fiber. We're working on solar panels. We have an anti-reflective coating for solar panels that increases the efficiency of solar panels. We're working on biogas. And of course, we're also using our materials to make lighter cars and planes as well to reduce fuel consumption. This is the one-sheet summary of our next 5-year strategy. DSM in motion, it's called. And if you look at it closely, we have some mega trends here. Global shifts, climate and energy, health and wellness, really driving the developments in the world. We've connected those to high-growth economies. We're expanding in these high-growth economies. We're using innovation and sustainability as growth drivers as well. And we realize that we need to acquire companies as well to make this happen. And it's all based on this life sciences and material sciences technology position we have. The other thing we feel is very important is that if you look at biotech and if you look at chemistry and you see them as separate entities within your company, then you're not fully extracting the value of working together in those areas. So we have this leadership in sustainability because we have integrated biotech and catalysis into each other. So we're using these very much in one group where we are trying to look for the most optimal solutions. On top of that, we look at process technology. How would an ideal process look like? And I will show you a couple of examples of that. And on the basis of that, we try to translate that into, let's say, a desire for developing new technologies. And we're increasingly looking at renewable raw materials to start from. So the options we have, if you look at homogeneous catalysis versus biocatalysis, if you want to do a hydrogenation reaction, depending on the solubility of your starting material and the selectivity you need, we can go for homogeneous catalysis solutions, or we use alcohol dehydrogenases. We have both of those tools available in our company. Another one, if you look at our technology position for statins, we have used our biotechnology to produce pravastatin. We're currently not producing pravastatin anymore, but we used to do this in the past, using Penicillium chrysogenum as a fermentation organism. And we also have chemistry and biocatalysis to make the synthetic, semi-synthetic cholesterol-lowering drugs, such as atorvastatin. So if you look at atorvastatin and also rosuvastatin, two of those statins that are really blockbusters right now, Lipitor, close to off-patent, Crestor not yet, they have a common building block which is very difficult to synthesize. It has two chiral centers that you have to make. So there are several routes that you can actually follow to make these chiral centers. And there has been an enormous amount of activity to make this happen. And several companies, also present in this room, have embarked on this endeavor to really get to this compound you see right here. This is taken from a review written by Martin Schumann, one of my colleagues. What we have embarked on is this last reaction. It's a reaction with deoxyribose aldolase, which was originally discovered by Chewy Wang. He has fantastic ideas. And what you have here, you basically have chloroacetaldehyde and acetaldehyde, two non-chiral compounds. And in an asymmetric synthesis, you create in a single-step reaction. You couple the two. They're aldol couplings. And you get to this diol compound with two chiral centers, 96.6 DE. That is then converted into this lactone ring, and you can use that as a starting material. So you start from very cheap intermediates. You have an enzyme that does this trick, and then you make two chiral centers in one go. Seems to be too good to be true, you could say. Well, in essence, it was too good to be true, because the enzyme is very rapidly inactivated by the chloroacetaldehyde. So we had to do directed evolution and all kinds of modifications to make sure that this DIRA enzyme would actually remain active during the catalysis, and I could spend 1.5 hours on that whole trajectory, but I will not. But we've been able to do this successfully and have scaled up this synthesis route to commercial scale. And then the thing is that if you have this sugar compound, you can make the lactone out of it, and if you have this lactone, it's very easy to replace the chlorine molecule either by a nitrile, or you keep it in that place and you can make atorvastatin or rosuvastatin. So it's the same building block for two large applications. So a very interesting building block, and we could only do this because we have competences in biocatalysis and we have competences in chemical catalysis. If we now look at our sustainability agenda and profile, we have been awarded by the Dow Jones Sustainability Index organization, which is called SUM, the SUM Sustainability Awards. That was announced on June 11th, so this is really very fresh. And I have a small movie that I would like to show you by our CTO. CEO, sorry.
Sustainability is a core value for DSM. This is our responsibility for people today and generations to come. We are committed to continuously improving the eco-footprint of our own operations. But increasingly, sustainability has also become a business driver for DSM. With our products, we provide sustainability to our customers as a part of our value proposition for the entire supply chain. Products with more value and less environmental impact, like coatings for solar cells, waterborne, eco and healthy-friendly paints, renewable bio-based materials, and green, halogen-free plastics for electronics. Over 80% of our innovation pipeline are Eco Plus products, which currently account for almost 40% of our total sales. And by 2015, this will grow towards even 50% of DSM's total business. Sustainability has become our way of doing business.
Okay. So he mentioned something like Eco Plus. Next year, 50% of our total sales we want to have labeled as Eco Plus. So what does that mean? Eco Plus is a term that we use to describe that the products and the processes we develop have to be superior and have to have more ecological benefits relative to mainstream competing solutions. And ecological impact is measured based on a life cycle analysis. So we have to do, let's say, a solid scientific analysis of this. We even benchmark that with outside parties to help us with the credibility of such a number to do that. So Eco Plus is fairly easy to measure. But of course, sustainability is not just planet. It is also people. That's people, planet, and profit. So planet you can measure by the Eco Plus. But how do you measure people? So we also have a criterion we call People Plus. And they, again, are DSM solutions that create a measurable positive impact on people's lives, better than the mainstream competing solutions. But how do you measure that? And that is a tool that we don't have ready yet. And so what we're trying to do is do social impact measurement metrics development together with peer companies and also the Sustainability Consortium. And I could imagine that there are companies in the room that would also be interested in how do you measure this? And how can you make that also a criterion that actually helps you to make decisions in your portfolio? As an example, this is our route to make cephalexin, which is one of the most used cephalosporin antibiotics. In the past, we had an old route where we started from sugar, we did a penicillin fermentation, and then we needed 13 chemical steps to turn this into a cephalexin. And basically, you have to take a beta-lactam ring and turn it into a cephalexin ring. So you have to expand a 5-ring into a 6-ring. That is not so easy. It's difficult chemistry, heat, labile compounds, etc. What we do nowadays, we have a new route where we have metabolically engineered the penicillium strain so that it already includes this cephalosporin ring. It has an enzyme in there that is called expandase that makes a 6-ring out of a 5-ring. And on top of that, it has an acyl transferase that actually adds adipoyl to the side chain. So we make adipoyl 7-ADCA as a fermentation product. This is a non-natural compound. So nowadays, we would call this synthetic biology. We hesitate with that term because there's a lot of, let's say, emotion around it, but it is a non-natural compound made by fermentation. After that, we need 2 enzymatic steps to turn this into cephalexin. So it's a completely different process. It's fully water-based, so we don't use any solvents anymore. And the benefit here is that we have 65% less energy materials and 50% lower cost. On top of that, it has a higher quality because we don't need to remove any solvents anymore. It was very difficult to remove the remainders of these solvents. So we have a new brand that we call DSM Pure Actives, which actually is a People Plus criterion as well. So the quality of the antibiotics is better. If you now look at the life cycle analysis, and this was done by the Öko Institute in Germany, on all scores you see here, resource consumption, risk potential, toxicity potential, emissions, energy consumption, and area use, the new process scores better than what we had before. And as a result, we are the only antibiotics producer, or beta-lactam antibiotics producer, that still has a manufacturing capability in Europe. Most of the other producers actually have manufacturing capabilities in China or India. And this technology, this enzymatic technology to couple a new side chain, you can use for other side chains as well. So this is a whole portfolio of fermentation products on top, side chains that we make chemically or by biocatalysis, and we couple them with enzymes that would normally hydrolyze and amidic bond. So the tricks that you need to actually couple these side chains together with the nucleus are quite substantial. But going back to where it all starts from, it all starts with market needs. So you really have to understand what does your customer really want. And if you now look at sustainability as a business driver, sustainability is hardly ever the sole business driver. If you are in materials, performance is the driver number one. The second driver is cost price. And the third one is sustainability. And I think this is still the case. And unless we have green procurement, which of course governments can do, this is the case we see right now. In some areas, sustainability is much more of a business factor than in others. If you're in sports and leisure, for instance, then you can have a green profile and it could help you to sell a sports shoe. We also have the same thing in automotive and electronics. There is a green drive. But if you're looking at the typical nylon application, for instance, then it's very difficult to compete. And the questions you typically get are on cost prices. So the challenge is, how do you actually now promote green? Green is a door opener, but it doesn't really close the deal. Also, the question is, what is really green? And we can have a discussion there as well. Functional performance is essential, but customer stakeholders, if you talk to customers, the typically first person you see on the other end of the table is somebody from purchasing. And somebody from purchasing typically doesn't have a sustainability target. They typically have pricing targets. And so you really have to be careful who is the other person on the other end that I'm talking to. So what we feel is very important, if you have a new bio-based building block, if you just supply the building block to your customer, they will not use it. So prototyping is very important. And that's why having both the life sciences and the material sciences competences in-house is very important. So we actually make the material. We actually make the bumper for the car manufacturer. And so you have to do prototypes to really make that happen. The other thing you see that in some areas you could wonder, for instance in bio-based ethylene, is that something to stay or does it have a temporary value? Is it the same as ethylene or is it something else than ethylene? And those are things you have to address. And what you also have to do is find out which customers or companies are more sensitive for the green arguments and hence willing to pay a premium. Because let's say in the development of these new building blocks, there is of course always a period where it is actually more costly to develop a new building block. So we've done some customer interviews, and some of them really support the sustainability message and some don't. So these are the ones in green, of course, they support it. Green issues used to be above all on the marketing agenda. So marketing is using it. And you can say, well, if it is only marketing, but at least that's a start. Replace the typical use of PVC is one. Customer goods, electronics, and auto parts are the best areas for bioplastics. There are more neutral statements that want to do it together with us, for instance. There has always been a need, but that's more like an argument that a company would use that is not self-propelling this whole industry. And there are, of course, also companies that say that the cost and the performance of bioplastics hinder the usage of these bioplastics. And that's difficult to demonstrate the value to a customer. So this is a thing that will not work. If you just go somewhere and say it's green, you cannot just increase the prices. Typically what we do see is that price increases maybe is what is accepted is something like 4 to 5%, if you're lucky. That's the current situation. And that may change, but it is difficult, especially for new intermediates, to push them in the markets. The other thing is, what is really green? If you take a customer perspective, if you go to a supermarket or somewhere else and you try to find a label that tells you how green the product is, I think you will end up in utter confusion. Because there are many, many labels. Some of them you don't really know what's behind it. Some of them actually are more greenwashing than anything else. So what we would really like to see is that there are clear and unambiguous international standards to verify claims about sustainable products. And I think there are tools available. It's more like, hey, we should use them to really create this level playing field. If you now look at bio-based products and services, I'd like to highlight a little bit what we're trying to do with the shift going from oil-based to agricultural-based raw materials. One of the things that we find very important is that we have to turn waste into value. This is more or less the cradle-to-cradle approach. In the traditional thinking, if you're a chemical company, you start with a resource, you make a product, and that product has a profit, and you have waste, and that waste is a cost factor. If you follow the cradle-to-cradle approach, thinking more cyclically, the resource is turned into products, and you have multiple value pockets. As an illustration, if you take CO2 and minerals, you use algae to make biofuels. Very difficult to do. Shell stepped out of it. Why did Shell step out of it? If you only look at the diesel value, algae will never fly. What you have to do is look at the full picture. Algae can be a source of protein. Actually, the protein is the highest value of algae. If you use that protein for fish feed, you have an interesting source to make new protein. You can make polyunsaturated fatty acids. We are collaborating, or we have acquired the Martech Corporation that helps us with this particular business. Of course, biodiesel will be a product as well. You will have valuable chemicals that you can make in algae or in cyanobacteria, and on top of that, you will have some biomass that you can actually turn into something else, maybe into biogas. So if you take the full value of algae, it does fly. And that's why I think it is very important to do this in a consortium with companies. Shell cannot do this alone. Shell can do this with several companies that add value to the developments. So it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking about waste, and thinking in waste more in terms of opportunities than in cost. We have embraced on this with the DSM Bio-based Products and Services, which is a special business unit within DSM that is focusing on this. We're looking at two areas, bio-based energy and bio-based chemicals and materials. And in bio-based energy, we're looking at cellulosic bioethanol, biogas, and microbial biodiesel. So we're using microbial biodiesel based on algae together with Martech. And again, focusing on how can we get more value out of algae than you currently have. On the other hand, we're producing succinic acid, biosuccinium. We have a program for bio-based adipic acid, and we have an emerging portfolio of other products as well. And we do this in joint ventures. We don't do this alone. So in the bio-based energy area, we work together with POET, that has the infrastructure and the connection to the agricultural suppliers of feedstocks. And on the right-hand side, we have Reverdia, which is a joint venture between Roquette, one of the largest starch producers in Europe, and DSM. So if you look at POET DSM, I'll give you a little bit more detail because it has been quite in the US press as well. I think it gave, well, a lot of people were surprised that we actually ended up in this area. Unlocking the cellulosic bioethanol opportunity. What we try to do is combine the technology position we have in chemistry and biotechnology with the manufacturing infrastructure and also the market access that POET has. On top of that, you see that POET has an interesting presence in the US, of course, but if you unlock the potential of cellulosic feedstocks and you think in other targets than fuels, then the potential is enormous. So we feel that we can roll out this technology, first of all, in the US with the 27 plants that POET has, but we can roll this out in a much broader sense if we go global. So the roles that we both have are depicted in this picture here. You have biomass as a feedstock, logistics, pre-treatment, all present at POET. We do enzymatic hydrolysis and fermentation based on the enzymes and the yeast that we have developed. You have to realize that the sugars you get out of this process are a combination of C5 and C6 sugars. The C6 sugars can be taken by yeast, but the C5 sugars are not. So if you do just this, you do enzymatic hydrolysis and then you leave the sugar in, if you take the ordinary yeast, you're only getting half the output. If you take our yeast, you get double that output. So it's a very important realization that you have to develop this C5 yeast, and we've done that. Afterwards, recovery and, of course, product and market channels available at POET. We will build together a first plant. And that first plant is for us, let's say, we will not build any additional plants as DSM. We want to prove our technology on this significant scale. So commercial scale fermentation plant. After that, we want to roll out our technology in a licensing model to other interested customers. The other joint venture is interesting as well. What we are doing here is developing new building blocks. So this is not about fuels. This is about building blocks for polymers. If you look at succinic acid, it could be a replacement for adipic acid in some applications. This is a greenhouse gas emissions profile of adipic acid. If you produce adipic acid using current technologies, you produce 9 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of product. If you can replace this by succinic acid, you have 0.9 kilograms of CO2 emitted per kilogram of succinic acid. So that's quite a gain. So on a ski boot, for instance, as an example, on a single ski boot, that would be on a pair of ski boots, that would be 8 kilograms of CO2 saved. If so that's compared to chemically produced adipic acid. Also, there are some competing technologies that produce succinic acid by fermentation. We've chosen to go for yeast. We wanted to, we looked at the process and we said if we want to produce an acid, we have to do it at low pH. Because then you don't produce the salt, you produce the acid. And you don't need to titrate, and you don't produce gypsum as a side product. That was our starting position. The only problem was there was no yeast making succinic acid. All the succinic acid strains that were developed were based on bacteria. So we said, well, the challenge is bigger, but we know that at the end, if we take a product, a production focus, the ideal process will be based on a low pH. So we pursued this. We developed a yeast that can actually produce the succinic acid. It produces the acid and not the salt, and we have what we feel the greenest process. So in our current situation, we're producing this in Italy and in France in a pilot plant. We have this 0.9 kilograms of CO2 emitted per kilogram of succinic acid produced. If we would produce in Brazil, for instance, then actually we can have a negative greenhouse gas emission profile. The point is that on top of the 1 kilogram of, on top of the resource that you use to start from, the sugar, we also need 1 mole of CO2 per mole of produced product. So you can actually go below the zero line, and there are not too many examples of that. Compared to the competing technologies where you use bacteria, producing at high pH, using ammonium sulfate, you will have a higher greenhouse gas emission profile. So what can you use this new molecule for? You can use it for polybutylene succinate. So that's butanediol and succinic acid, polyester. Biodegradable polyester. Can be used in food packaging. You can use polyurethane. You can make polyurethane foams. So thermoplastic polyurethane foams. You can use it in sports and footwear, in nonwovens and fibers, in diapers, automotive, and also in agriculture. And agricultural films are interesting as well, because if you look at agricultural films the way they are used right now, they are fairly thick. And that is because the farmer has to pull them out and dispose of them. If you use a biodegradable material, as PBS is, you can actually leave it on the land. You could mill it with the soil and leave it in there. So you can use less material to reach the same effect. And you don't have to remove it anymore. So making succinic acid, we identified that we wanted to use low pH yeast technology. We patented the process. We developed a best-in-class carbon footprint. We validated this process at demo scale. We validated the product at the customer, very important. And we made PBS, but we also supplied them with the raw materials. And then we are currently building our commercial facility in Cassano in Italy. We chose Italy because Roquette has an existing plant there that we could use. And this is the crew, and here you see the building schedule. We want to be operational by the end of 2012. That's this year, so we're very close to that. And we don't have a picture that is more recent than this one, but I can assure you this is already a couple of months ago, and we will make that target. So why do we feel, why are we doing these things? So first of all, looking at bio-based ethanol, making cellulosic feedstocks available, ultimately wanting to produce materials using those feedstocks. The second one is succinic acid, but there are more out there. What you see in this graph on the right is in dark blue, you see the substitute biochemicals. So those are more the replacement biochemicals. You can say bioethylene is one of them. Also adipic acid is one of them. Where you really say, well, it's nothing new. You basically make a plug-in solution. What you also see in the picture is a light blue area where there will be new monomers that are currently not used and that could be bio-based. And succinic acid is an example of that. And it will take longer to penetrate the markets because you really need to develop a new material. But we do feel that there is enormous potential over there. So if you look at the total value of this sector, it could be around 9 billion in 2020. And that's, of course, an interesting area to take a part of. So our progress in bio-based building block, I illustrated bio-based succinic acid, representative of a new building block. And we're also working on bio-based adipic acid. I cannot give you any details right now, but maybe in the next conference. Very interesting building block, much larger than of course, succinic acid. It's a drop-in chemical, so that is really a very interesting opportunity. So we are developing sustainable products and processes, and we want to share some of these with you also on at this conference. Part of that is, of course, this luncheon meeting. But we also have 3 presentations, one of them by Peter Puglauer, looking at continuous processing in the pharmaceutical industry. Harold Moody, he wanted to speak about beta-lactam antibiotics, but he had to call in sick, I'm afraid, so you will have to miss on that lecture. And the last one is Rinus Broxman. He will speak on Wednesday, and he will talk about winning key renewable raw materials. We have made an analysis on what are the raw materials that we will use in the future. I think that's an interesting lecture to go to as well. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and thank you for your attention and be ready to answer some questions. Thank you. On the back.
Okay, there we go. Take
All
number
right.
3. So I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not asking on my own behalf, but I was wondering if you fund academic research that leads to some of these new products, potential new products.
We are not funding this, let's say, the discovery of new products. We are funding academic research to help us to build new tools to make these products. And we're in the custom manufacturing area. We don't develop drugs, we make the drugs. And so we're active in networks that develop new enzymes or new homogeneous catalyst tricks and those types of things. We're very active in that area, particularly in Europe, I must say. We're trying to expand that network far more into the US as well. But we're working with codexes and Verenium in this area, so that's already something where we're doing that. But that's not yet with the academic community. Oh, okay.
Rich Chappis, Delaware Sustainable Chemistry Alliance. I had heard another presentation by Rob about some of the things you're doing in terms of managing your venture portfolio and working with startups and so on.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how you integrate that into, what you're doing here?
Yeah. Well, we do two things in venturing, and that is we invest in, let's say, early startups that have just escaped from university, you could say. Yeah? That is an area where you can say, well, that is very early technology. It's high risk. But if you hit a winner, it's an enormous. You're the first, and you have a high level of participation in such a startup. So that's one. The other area where we invest in is typically after the first management change, you could say. If a startup company is somewhat more mature, then typically you see a management change. The CEO becomes the CTO, and there's a business guy coming in. And at that level, we typically invest at somewhat lower risk. The amount of investments you have to do is somewhat higher. But then, let's say the technology has already proven itself a bit more. So then we look more in terms of how does it fit our business portfolio. And in the former case, we were looking more at how does it fit our technology portfolio. And we're doing both things. And I think if you talk about innovation, collaboration with academic institutions is important, but also collaboration and actually integration, and also spinning out, actually. We do that as well. If a technology development inside DSM is no longer of strategic importance, we have spun them out as well. So the whole process of innovation is really like a give and take, open system, you could say, which is totally different from the way we did it 15 years ago. And then we thought we could develop everything ourselves. And you've seen also in the semi-synthetic antibiotics example I gave you, that is currently a joint venture with Sinochem and DSM, but we have also involved Codexis, which was then far more a startup than they are now, to help us with those processes. And so it really is a very dynamic, interactive process with the outside world, you could say. It's coming up.
Maya Wood, NSF International. I was just wondering, as you work towards, greening your products, like in your efforts with plastics, for example, how do you evaluate, what's a greener plastic? Or is there some sort of internal metric that your company has developed? Do you use tools that are already developed by others? And maybe you could speak for yourself and in Europe in general, just sort of wondering what's going on.
Okay. For our eco evaluation, we are using, let's say, there's standard life cycle analysis software that you can buy. We're just using that, and there is there's a database. I forgot the name of the database, which is basically used by most of the peer companies. We know that BASF is using it, so DuPont is using it. So we're all using the same database of, let's say, what does it take? And because what you need, of course, you need a proper mass balance of your process versus the process that is out there. And you really have to look at everything. Like what are emissions, what is water use, etc., land use. So it's a fairly complicated exercise, you could say, but because we have a database, you can use some elements of other processes to help you with your life cycle assessment. And so I would say the tools to do a proper LCA are fairly well established. And although I don't think we need too much new things there, what we do need to do is feed the database with additional reactions and data. But the tools are, I think, very well crystallized out. For people, it's a totally different situation, as I try to illustrate. If you want more details, I can help you with that. Yeah?
It's very impressive that you, Mike Can, University of Scranton, it's very impressive that you have your CEO or head honcho on board with sustainability as the champion at the top. And you mentioned marketing. I'm curious about internal marketing of sustainability. If I was to walk down the hallway of any DSM facility across the planet and run into the first person and say, gee, what's sustainability? Why is it important worldwide? And how, in your professional life here at DSM, do you contribute to that? Would that 5% of the people be able to answer that question? 10%? 100%, because you've done this wonderful internal marketing, and it's in everybody's psyche.
Yeah, 100% is always difficult to attain, of course. But no, but what we have is we call sustainability our core value. And if you talk about the core value, it's a single core value. Because sustainability has a lot in it. It has in it that you would like to have a better future, etc., that you don't spoil the environment, etc. So sustainability, if you do it right, really cares a lot of our values as well. So the core value is that. And basically for every process that we run, for every project that we do these eco analyses. And if a project is not performing on eco, it will not maintain itself during our portfolio. So it will be gone. So that's let's say, so people are confronted with it all the time. And people have targets also on sustainability, all the way up to the managing board. People have targets on sustainability. And so it really is, of course, it's in the hearts and the minds of people. And actually, I'm pretty proud of that we have been able to do that. And what safety, we always started with safety, and we wanted safety to be in the hearts and the minds of people. I think sustainability is next to safety now. So it is, if you ask people in China, I think you would get a pretty high score. But I challenge you to do the exercise.
We've got time for one more question.
You raised a really interesting statistic very early on about the amount of food that gets wasted, 30 to 40%. And I'm just curious, that's a great opportunity if you look at the chemical diversity that's in food. Are you doing anything or thinking anything about how you might either prevent the waste of food or to take advantage of that chemical diversity in the waste?
Yeah. We have a large program on food and nutrition security where we want to use our nutritional ingredients. We have, of course, the vitamins and other nutritional ingredients to improve the quality of food. That's one. We also want to look at barrier materials so that we can actually package food better. I think there's a bit of a misconception with the general audience that packaging is bad. I mean, if you don't package food and you throw it away, that is in terms of greenhouse gas emissions far, far worse than using a little bit more plastic to package it. So we have to work on that. We're also looking at how can we actually, for instance, have these post-harvest losses in developing countries. If you look at citrus fruits, for instance, a typical farmer in a developing country doesn't even get it to the market because half of it is already gone. So we have some antifungal components that we actually are spraying now in some of these areas. And so it's a fermentation product actually that's a very interesting antifungal. That's called natamycin. that really prevents fungal growth on them, and you can have substantial reductions of losses there. And so we're addressing this whole food and nutrition security item as a single large exercise where we can really use a variety of our life sciences and material sciences competences. It's a big challenge. We also feel that we can't do it alone there. I think if you look at these 9 billion people, and if you look at the food we have to redistribute or make sure that it doesn't get wasted, I think that's quite a challenge. And we also, as a customer, have to learn that if you go to a supermarket and something is a little bit brownish, that you can still eat it. And if you look at the date of a piece of meat in a package, you might even be tempted to smell it before you actually throw it away when it's over the date. Sometimes, and we're so used to those dates that we're not doing the things that our grandfather was doing, smelling whether it's still okay or not. And I think that, you can also develop packaging, of course, that tells you that a foodstuff is no longer good. I mean, if certain amines are emitted, you could detect those amines and have a red package. If you could have that, then a customer doesn't look at the date anymore, but he really looks at a detector that tells him or her that the food is no longer okay. I think there's a lot of innovation that we need to accomplish there. Because I think 30 to 40% food wastage is a shame.
Well, are we on? Yeah, we're on. Okay, Marcel, first of all, on behalf of everybody here and everybody on this planet, I would like to thank you for the leadership position that DSM has taken as a global player in the chemical space, and I'll use that term generically in the chemical space. We've got a lot of people that participate in this program like that, and I just want to acknowledge the role that DSM has been playing and is playing from a leadership point of view, and thank you for a very interesting lunchtime presentation.
Thank you,
Let's
Bob.
take them again. I'd like you to accept that. If we need to ship that for you, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.